A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. Today we talk about autoimmune diseases. I read that it is exploding and more people are suffering from autoimmune diseases. And today I would like to know why that is. Who does it tend to affect more and what could we do about it? That is the topic of today's show. Stay tuned, we'll get started soon. Now I would like to introduce my guest to you. It is Dr. Med Harald Burgard. A very warm welcome, dear Harald.
Hello, dear Alexander. Good day.
Is what I said true? Autoimmune diseases are exploding.
Yes, unfortunately. So, today we live in an environment that pollutes us with so many toxins. It doesn't matter whether it's microplastics, whether it's hormones in drinking water or exhaust gases in the environment. At some point your organism can no longer distinguish between friend and enemy and begins to shoot at yourself. And there is a huge list of so-called autoimmune diseases where the body basically starts to destroy itself. One of the best known is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the destruction of the thyroid gland. It starts with an overactive condition and at some point the thyroid is damaged. Or rheumatism. Autoimmune disease, or white spot disease. Or chronic fatigue is also one of them. Chronic fatigue syndrome is also an autoimmune reaction, as we know. There's a huge list there. Kidney disease, lung disease, lupus, whatever. Things that most people have never heard of, but which are not at all rare and which are very difficult to treat. Because in conventional medicine we usually always give cortisone. This means we suppress the immune system. Or then MTX or so-called biologics, so all drugs that work, but can cause very serious side effects in the long term and are poorly tolerated by many people.
But I don't understand the logic at all. I mean, the immune system is going crazy and I'm pushing it down. There's a reason why it's going up. So if I suppress the immune system so that it no longer acts excessively, I still haven't solved anything and haven't eliminated the cause.
Yes, that's always the question. What approach do I use to approach an illness? In conventional medicine, we proceed by saying that the patient has an excessive immune reaction. We say, well, there was something at some point, for example a pathogen contamination with streptococci or viruses or whatever. And now the immune system is ramped up and we have to suppress it. For rheumatism, other autoimmune diseases. And that's why we take medication. We take cortisone for that, and we take other things for that. That's one way. When I asked colleagues at conferences how rheumatism occurs, they said, it's quite clear that it's an inflammation. If I then said, where does it come from? Well, we don't know for sure, but at some point there was a pathogen load and it's gone, but the immune system is still activated.
But if I artificially suppress this immune system and now somehow influenza or something else comes along, I'm totally open and welcome this virus with open arms, right?
I always tell people that if they lock the cat in the closet, the mice will dance on the table. Of course, that is exactly the problem. If you, like me, have been analyzing everything chemically in the laboratory for 17 years, then you see that it is not the case that pathogen contamination, for example, has disappeared. When I have patients who, for example, come with chronic pain in the skeleton, no matter what I call it now, rheumatism, rheumatoid, arthritis, polymyalgia rheumatica, basically it doesn't matter. They come in pain, have fibromyalgia, whatever. Then you will always find a huge mix of different loads. And they didn't have streptococci at some point and it's gone, but they still have them and they are chronically active. And this can be detected in the blood. They have toxoplasmosis, which may still be ongoing, or maybe they also have chronic Lyme disease, or they still have some kind of toxin contamination that causes pain, such as lead or cadmium. These are metals that cause pain. So now a person comes along and has 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 different things that permanently trigger inflammation in the body. Then of course I can go and give cortisone and suppress the immune system reaction, or I can go and take the stuff out. Then the haunting stops, permanently. That is the path we are taking. And we always prove this in the laboratory.
Nowadays, laboratory diagnostics make it possible to find out basically everything at the cause level, so all the triggers. And when I see what and how much is in there and doesn't actually belong there, it actually makes sense that I can just help the patient by simply reducing it.
Absolutely. So I always proceed like this, that's the cause-related way, to look, first to make a questionnaire, quite extensive with 17 pages, then to look at the old findings, to physically examine people from top to bottom. Then we have scanners where we know within 10 or 20 minutes, what is wrong, where is your needle in the haystack, what fundamental problems do they have, so that I know where I have to go. I can't say, I'll take 3 liters of blood from you and do 10,000 tests. That's impossible. I have to focus. And to do this I need certain procedures that show me what the problem is with you. But then I can also prove what that is. And we now have many options for detecting which toxins are in your body, which pathogens are still active, and which metal contamination is tormenting you. And of course we also have the options to take all of that out.
I'll come back to that in a moment. The bottom line is, autoimmune diseases, I don't have to learn to live with them.
Absolutely not.
Because I always hear it is incurable, you have that now.
Yes, I heard that too when I had allergies. I had severe allergies from the age of 3. Every year from January, February to October, pollen allergies, asthma, the whole 9 yards. And I had to endure that until 17, 18 years ago.
Great childhood.
And then it was always said, well, we do acupuncture or we give cortisone, or stay at home and close the windows. Those were always the most interesting tips I was given. And I took all sorts of medications that made me tired. Until I discovered therapy at some point and everything was gone within just a few treatments. And really gone that I went to the riding stables with my 2 girls for 4 weeks, twice, 2 weeks, a total of 4 weeks. I previously had a severe horse allergy and rode with them, rode with 40 children, and I had nothing. So I know how it works for myself. I was so fascinated by it that I said, okay, I just have to do that with my patients, show it, and share it. And then 17 years ago I started treating based on the cause. And as is always the case, you have patients who don't make any progress, then you just ask someone in your network and then there are always new ideas and the technology continues and now we can do apheresis and much more to really get everything out of the body, almost everything that is possible. That's fantastic, but it's also very effective because it helps people.
Also, for example, the trigger for your asthma or your pollen allergy. I often hear that in connection with the intestines, intestinal cleansing, detoxification of the intestines occurs in connection with pollen. What was it like for you? How did you solve that?
Of course I don't know where it started. That had already happened in childhood. But as you say, you first have to see what kind of poison you have in your body that is constantly triggering your immune system. For example, if you get a vaccination as a child, tetanus. Tetanus always contains, worldwide, there is no vaccine without aluminum. Aluminum doesn't have to do anything, but it can. Then you get aluminum in. Then you got some antibiotics because you had a middle ear infection as a child or because you had diarrhea or who knows what. Then at some point you may have lived in Saarland like me. We always had a coal industry. Then we had the iron industry. We had endless dirt. Then you breathe the stuff in. Then you get lead, you get cadmium, whatever. Then as children we ran around, a meter tall, 1.50 meters tall, near the street where there was lead from the exhaust fumes. That was absorbed. Via the skin, via breathing. At some point the stuff accumulates in the body and then one person gets sick and the other can tolerate a lot. They won't get sick. That is the individual stress threshold. One person has a deep illness and gets sick early. The other person can tolerate everything and never gets sick. But at some point there comes a point where people have taken in so much. You know the picture of the camel. The camel is loaded. And then something else happens which is what breaks the camel's back. An illness or job loss or stress with your wife or husband, whatever. And then you get sick. And then you think, wow, that just came out of nowhere. No, it didn't. This has been building up for years.
The camel was already loaded.
Exactly, then someone puts another straw and then it breaks. And then you might have a damaged intestine and you have to check whether you have leaky gut syndrome or whatever. This is a search across many parameters, across many areas, to find out, what problem does your body have? What's wrong with you? And what amount is causing you problems and why? For example, we always look at how your genetics are designed to react to stress. This is called genetic degree of inflammation. Are you someone who can take a lot and react normally? Or are you someone who reacts to small external stimuli with a violent defense, with a violent inflammation that perhaps doesn't stop at all? We can prove all of this pretty accurately today. And then you can also understand why one person gets sick and the other, who perhaps has the same exposure, lives in the same household, eats and drinks the same, has nothing at all. But we can find out.
You can find out where the problem comes from. But the simple fact is, I know a lot of people with autoimmune diseases and they have come to terms with it. The doctor said you have to live with it, and now they have their spray or this or that, and they know they are victims for life.
18 years ago, for example, I read about a doctor, Schumacher, who wrote 40 years ago, asthma does not arise from clinical progression in allergies, but from UN-healed pathogens existing on the lungs that lead to asthma. And if you treat it, it stops. I found that very interesting and thought I'd take a look. Then I always tested the patients who came with allergic asthma and always saw that they either had silent, slightly active streptococci, pneumococci, Klebsiella, and so on. So typical pathogen on the lungs. I treated it and afterwards the asthma went away. Wow. He wrote that 40 years ago. That is now 50 or 60 years ago. These are things that we don't spread in conventional medicine. We say, you have a clinical progression, now you just take asthma spray to dilate the bronchi, blah blah. There is another way. And that's how it is with chronic autoimmune diseases. They have causes, you have to find them, evaluate them, prove them, and then eliminate them. Then the fuss can stop. What I can't do, I can't go and regenerate an organ in a body if it is destroyed. So if someone comes and has a destroyed kidney or their thumb is gone, then it's gone. But if a functional limitation is there, this can be remedied fantastically well because the body can regenerate itself. And you have to give it the chance. To do this you have to look at what is going on and how do you get it out.
I don't know how many people have pollen allergies these days and how many have sorted it out and wake up every year with swollen eyes and so on. You experienced this one-on-one. It wasn't exactly a great time as a youth when you were so handicapped, was it?
I would say that was actually a nightmare for a child. If you are told to stay at home, put down the blinds, close the windows. I couldn't ride a bike. I always had asthma spray with me. I always had drops with me. I couldn't drive a convertible, ride a motorcycle, things other people do. That didn't work at all. Near a horse, 100 meters, no, 2, 3, 4, 5 meters near the horse, I stood there an hour later and sprayed and squeaked like an old barn door. If you've experienced that and it's gone afterwards, that's cool. That was my experience that made me do it because someone who had been treated with it himself told me that it was possible and I knew nothing about it as a doctor. So I said, okay, I'll take a look at it, and I was amazed that it worked. And then I have colleagues in whose house I still work today. They are 2 orthopedic surgeons. I asked them to make the practice rooms available to me when the practice was closed on Wednesday and Friday afternoons to try it out on other patients to see if it works. And it worked. And the practice gained enormous popularity relatively quickly, but that was almost 20 years ago. These things can be treated causally. And if someone comes with autoimmune diseases, which many people are really affected by, then you always have to look at which toxins, which metals, which pathogens, what intestinal disorders, and so on are there. Diagnose it, prove it chemically so that the patient can see that it really is like that, and then eliminate it.
We have a video about eliminating it here. Here you did what is called apheresis, right?
Exactly.
That means a kind of blood wash.
An environmental toxin apheresis, yes.
That means you try to remove various environmental toxins from the blood. This means that it goes out of one place and the clean, purified blood goes back in through filter systems at the other place.
Exactly.
I've already done it. It takes about 2 or 3 hours. You often do this twice because connective tissue then releases it again, right?
Yes. So it's generally the case with all therapies that when I pull toxins, metals, or something out of the body somewhere, I don't get into the cell directly with the procedures we have. But here, for example, this is an apheresis procedure, toxophoresis, where we can simply remove toxins from the body. I remove them from the blood, the connective tissue, the lymphatic system. In general, in the body, in all compartments, roughly speaking in the cells, outside the cells, there must be the same concentration. Now, through this process, I pull down toxins outside the cells and have a difference in concentration. Then stuff runs out of the cells again immediately afterwards until the concentration between inside and outside is the same. That's why you have to do the second apheresis 2 days later so that there are no side effects. And you then do this several times at certain intervals until enough has come out that the person is healthy. You always have to reduce the load in everything you do until it falls below your individual load threshold. Then it stops. It works, whether I just remove metals, with a so-called chelation therapy, which many of your viewers probably know, excellently, or with procedures like this, of course, much more extensive.
I remembered a quote from Dr. Joachim Mutter, who once told me that somehow with 800 chelate infusions you slowly get to the brain, to brain detoxification. And Dr. Klinghardt once told me that apheresis is actually the only way to efficiently detoxify the brain immediately.
Yes, well, first of all, when I do chelation therapy, I only take out metals, which is fantastic, that has to be said very clearly. And then I have the effect that I just explained, I take it out outside the cells and then it runs out. We also have a lymphatic system in the brain, which was discovered a few years ago and is called the glymphatic system. At night the brain contracts a little and then lymphatic channels emerge. The whole thing is triggered by melatonin, our sleep-inducing hormone. And that's how the brain becomes detoxified too. And of course I can promote the whole thing by removing not only metals but also other toxins through apheresis. If we find people, they have PCBs from the floors, they have formaldehyde from the cupboards, they have whatever in their bodies, we can prove that. In addition, with apheresis I can also remove circulating immune complexes, so proteins that have formed over the course of life and cause inflammation. The body can't break them down because there's too much, so it causes inflammation in one person's vessels, for someone else in the muscles, for a third in the brain, for the fourth it causes autoimmune diseases and so on. That's what I'm taking out, but also pathogens, herpes viruses, HIV viruses and so on. I can pull out all of these things with these special filters. We also have a filter, it was also used in New York as part of COVID-19 treatment. We have special filters where we can filter out and remove 99-point-something% of the pathogens in the blood within 4 hours. The technologies are already very advanced today, and the compatibility is excellent.
What is the connection? Apheresis with Lyme disease?
Well, of course many people also have a chronic pathogen burden, and that can be Borrelia, which is not that rare. They come with thought disorders, with depression, they come with stomach aches, they come with body aches, they come with whatever. Also arthrosis, for example. We also know, for example, that Borrelia feed on hyaluronic acid and can therefore nibble on your joint cartilage and then cause knee joint arthrosis.
Nice, great, okay.
That means that if I have a chronic pathogen burden with Borrelia, I of course have to get rid of it so that the fire is gone.
Can you treat Lyme disease with apheresis?
You can use apheresis to remove pathogens and reduce the pathogen load. So you can also reduce Borrelia with it. Of course not those in the joints, but those in the blood. You can also do this with other pathogens. And that's just the way it is. If I reduce the exposure through such environmental toxin apheresis, then your immune system has a breather again and can attack. Because that's what it can't do. The people who come with a chronic pathogen burden, their immune system is simply no longer able to kill the things. Or to keep them so small that no inflammation occurs. So these things can spread and can annoy and torment you. And that then leads to autoimmune processes. At some point the body no longer knows what to defend itself against.
Let's take a look at it now. Now this is a package.
Exactly, that's what we pull out of the body in terms of toxins. And here we introduced it into water. And you can see that when you press on it, real waves go up. And you can see that this is not something that is water-soluble and that the body could excrete on its own. You have to know that if your organism wants to get rid of poison, it has to make it water-soluble. But this cannot be done for many things. Here you can see very clearly what kind of dirt is in there.
You send it to the laboratory and then you have the results of what it all is. And then you have all the dirt in there that we simply have from the environment today.
And that's only a fraction of what we take out. This is just a little bit of what we put in the bag. That's much more what comes out there. But when you look at it and see what dirt is in there, when you shake it, it's quite significant. And we send it to the laboratory and then we usually see in the patients that there are 20, 30, 40 different toxins and metals in it. Then you can check for pathogens and so on. That is quite significant. People are sick for a reason. If someone comes and just does a prophylactic thing, we rarely have that, but sometimes someone comes and says, "Come on, let's take a look." And they are healthy. You won't find anything there. Or almost nothing. That is amazing. But those who are sick have a really high burden.
So a really important point is to do environmental apheresis as a first step in autoimmune diseases. And maybe even several such steps. And do you also do examinations? So blood tests?
Always. Without exception. Simply because we have to prove, also to the patient, their insurance company or whoever, that these things are actually there. As a doctor, I also want to see which laboratory values are abnormal. Because I can see from the noticeable values that the therapy is working. If you come and have high inflammation levels, CAP, or your neuromuscular autoimmune antibodies are high and they go away afterwards, then I can say, okay, the therapy worked. Of course, the patient's well-being always comes first, but I just have to see that the fire is gone. Because the person can come and say, okay, I feel better, but the smoldering is still there, and then 3 years later they get really sick because it wasn't put out. So you do lab values to see what is there, where is the fire, and to prove that it is gone.
2 more questions about this procedure. So plastic, for example, which we also ingest very often today, or hormones, are these also things that apheresis now removes?
Apheresis takes out everything that is pathological, that doesn't belong in the body, that changes the folding of proteins and thus gives them a different size or a different charge. And the filters recognize that and pull it out.
So it's like reverse osmosis with water, where actually only the H2O comes through.
Roughly speaking, yes.
Yes, I understand it too. Okay, that's very exciting. A very logical and simple procedure.
Yes, it's just a procedure, where we use special filters that are able to remove the very things I just mentioned, because they don't belong in the body.
How much apheresis do you generally need when you have a patient? I mean, I've already seen a success statistic, well, not statistics. Once, a lady who was around 80, she hasn't spoken a word for 7 years. And then she did this apheresis in a clinic and then she spoke. This was the first time in years. And then we thought, this is unbelievable, a miracle has happened. But something in that toxin prevented her from even speaking. So how do you experience that?
If you have patients who, for example, suffer from long COVID or chronic fatigue, there you find so many inflammatory substances, there you find antibodies against nerve tissue, against muscle tissue, there you find pathogen load and whatever, which then simply disrupt your neurology, which lead to inflammation in the brain, which leads to Alzheimer's or other neurodegenerative diseases. And if I lower this inflammatory burden, then you can either have immediate reactions, which we also see, or delayed reactions. I have also treated Alzheimer's patients, who were just sitting in the corner and after the treatment, not just with that but with a combined treatment, were able to participate in life again, recognized their son again, were able to make phone calls again, were able to go to events again. That's possible. We have patients who come with Parkinson's and their leg drags or they can no longer swing their arm and after a few treatments it's over. We have patients with MS who can be kept free of relapses and so on. Or many with rheumatism who are really pain-free afterwards. We have patients who have not been able to ride a motorcycle or pursue their hobbies for years. Everything is working again today, completely painless. That's possible, it takes a while, and I'm also of the opinion that you always have to treat someone until the symptoms and inflammation are gone so that it lasts. It's individual, it depends on how long you've had it, how much you have, how sensitive you are, what your genetic makeup is to react to inflammation, what I just told you. But if you do this correctly, the problem usually stops or things get significantly better.
You know, actually it almost makes me sick when I hear how people suffer, be it with Alzheimer's or the family is suffering or with Parkinson's. With MS, these are all terrible stories where people just come to terms with it and the whole environment suffers and you just surrender, acknowledge it and just make the best of it. But you can't always guarantee that you'll have a solution that might work, but it's the right way to take out what doesn't belong and then just hoping and praying that the miracle will happen.
In conventional medicine, we often approach research by trying to find a gene or some substance that we can block with a drug. I can understand that from a business perspective, because of course the pharmaceutical industry spends hundreds of millions until it has developed something and they want to make money and you have to have a patent on it so that not everyone copies it. This is helpful from a business perspective. And many of the medications we have are, thank God, a blessing. But we are not addressing the causes. And if the causes come from the environment, if the causes come from the fact that you were infected with a tick in the forest, then you just have to treat these things, and we just don't look for them. We do not look for chronic stresses, just the acute ones.
But when does the government actually have to take responsibility for ensuring that its own people are not harmed by such environmental toxins? This is a taboo topic.
There are limits, there are many things, but they don't work. They don't go far enough. For example, you can't reduce the level of toxins in workplaces in the manufacturing industry to such an extent that you don't get sick. In our town we had glass blowers for decades who made lead crystal glasses, beautiful things. But they also poisoned themselves with lead. And you see that in other industries and branches too. People work, they earn a living, but of course they take the risk of getting sick as a result. If you can get rid of it sufficiently, which you can, then you can help these people, but that's just not state of the art. That's just not done.
I was talking to a farmer in our region about organic apples and he also told me, well, you have organic apples as long as you don't exceed certain limits. We don't do that either. We now take 50 different chemicals and all 50 are below and things are good. But that's just really non-stop nonsense. It's just unbelievable what we're doing to ourselves, and I just don't know who should take responsibility for saying, now we have to change this because it can't go on like this, it's just getting worse.
We can only pass this on from person to person in a small circle. The people who know can help themselves with it. Unfortunately, it doesn't reach the masses, not yet.
Yes, not only that, I mean, some things I don't even know. You're just naive enough and at some point an expert comes to me again and says, stop, eye drops have mercury in them. Well, I don't take eye drops now, but it's a topic that I didn't know about and I think, my God, it doesn't just go on the skin, it goes straight in, that's unbelievable. And everyone knows that mercury sucks, right? I can't help but be amazed, and I think that sometimes the whole thing is just so hypocritical. What we do and how we lead such things and such people to suffer for 20 years and so on, all like your childhood.
For example, when we have pathogens, when patients come with chronic illnesses, then we do a mixture of physical and chemical therapy. For example, we use lasers and put it into the blood. We use heat. We can heat the eluate to 43 degrees before we put it into the filter, so we can kill pathogens. We always use an intravascular laser with photosensitizer during apheresis, which means we attack pathogens, procedures that I started 20 years ago, where I thought, well, that might be blah blah, but I'll just try it out. They work fantastically and you don't harm people, but you help them, you help without side effects, you help very effectively and you can achieve results that you can't do with anything else, or with almost nothing.
I really don't want to stop this show because it hits me so hard, emotionally I have to say, because it's just sad to see what we could do and don't so, and so many people suffer because of it. Just the hormone story, what hormones we give ourselves, which cause changes in the nature of people, where today there are even court decisions that say, this person was not capable of making judgments because their intestinal environment, their intestinal brain axis, actually affected the brain and they are not guilty, ultimately because they were not sane. Then I say to myself, my God, the judges are right, but we have to do something, right?
Yes, from my point of view, the courts could do a lot more for the patients. For example, if we have people for whom we can prove exposure and the insurance doesn't pay for it, then that always means the exposure is too low. That's a run-of-the-mill level of exposure. That's nonsense. There was once a colleague, an older gentleman at the university in Tübingen, who I think did a study, and then said, well, 60–70% of older people are contaminated with metal. You have to treat that. But I can also say that every diabetic, every high blood pressure patient, and we have a lot of them at an older age, is no longer treated. Because these substances, metals for example, lead and so on, not only have a toxic effect, but they also change your hormonal balance. For example, if I have divalent toxic metals in my body, like lead, like mercury, like nickel, for example, which is also found in food, then this triggers the production of estrogen. And now imagine a patient who has breast cancer and is given an estrogen blocker because her hormone cells are increasing. Now she's contaminated with lead, she's contaminated with nickel, she's contaminated with mercury, she has all this shit in her body. This all triggers estrogen production. Then you put an aromatase on one side, and on the other side you have the stuff in there that no one takes out. This is accelerating and braking at the same time. And then the question is, which prevails? These are things that trigger tumors. But we've known this for decades. There are studies, I can recite kilometers of studies to you. That is well known. And it's just that these things have no effect. Even small amounts can either have only a small toxic effect, but in return massively damage your immune system or damage your hormonal system or have a major toxic effect, but do less in immunology. What goes on in your body is always individual.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Med. Harald Burgard for you, dear viewers. And we should actually commit ourselves to something. You don't have to live with autoimmune diseases. There are ways to get out of the valley of tears. And I would like this for you and for everyone affected, to really take advantage of these opportunities and simply really detoxify. Take out what needs to come out and put in what needs to go in, so that the person can regenerate and experience the self-healing. With that in mind, all the best, and see you next time.